Hey guys, we're here at Urban Arrow in Amsterdam, and they've organized a tour around the city with an urban planner to show some of the bike infrastructure and a little bit more about the city. So let's go for a ride.
So I'm Meredith, hello. I've been living in the Netherlands for 10 years. I'm originally from California in the Bay Area. I'm a researcher at the Urban Cycling Institute at the University of Amsterdam. I'm in my third year of a PhD studying how to translate policies from the Netherlands around cycling and mobility to other places in the world, such as the US. As we go through the tour, I want you to consider where all the other modes are. And by modes, I mean other ways of traveling. Where are people driving cars? Where are people walking? But try to think about where does the car go when I'm here on the bike lane? All right, and what are the interactions? So we're going to go from this very outer layer, I would call, of Amsterdam, this suburban post-war layer, and we're going to sort of travel in towards the city center, passing through very different spatial, social landscapes. So just think about how these different aspects are playing as we go. Where we are is this edge of the second and third layer of the city of Amsterdam. And in the suburban context where actually Urban Arrow is located, is this very, was it familiar to you actually? This sort of suburban area with lots of parking lots and well, cars, high car use in that neighborhood. When we cross over to this area, we see much higher use of the bike. So why do you think that is?
Makes more sense.
Density, great, yeah. All of a sudden, right? We have some pretty high density here. Lots of people living on top of each other. The Netherlands is the densest country in the world as a country and not as a city. What else? What other reasons? So limited car parking spaces, right? Some of the best bicycle infrastructure is actually car infrastructure. Some of the best bicycle policies are actually car policies. So limiting access to on-street parking is certainly a huge factor as we cross into this second area where you're only allowed, I think maybe this neighborhood is different, but around one car parking spot per apartment. And then it costs around 400 euros a year to have a car here, whereas in the suburban area, there's pretty much no limit. What else? What do you see around you? Yes, exactly. So there's schools, right? We just passed a school actually over there. We see some other shops and restaurants and cafes on the ground floor. So this idea of land use. And land use has a very intimate connection with transportation. The longer the distances, you see a very different sort of transport mix, right? We cannot forget this interaction between the land use and transportation. But also the bicycle network itself, right? We from our last stop, from Urban Arrow to here, we rode on every single type of bicycle infrastructure there is, okay? We rode on a separate sort of greenway path, right? That's completely separate from cars and sort of a lush park area. We rode on something like this, a sort of semi-protected bicycle lane. And then we just rode on a residential area, right? So all different types. And this is an image of the bicycle network of Amsterdam. So still very dense. It covers the whole city. And we are, we're somewhere around here. So we see a fluidity in the network as well, right? You wouldn't design a car network with one little car road here and one little car road here and one car road here, right? No. So that's the same approach here. A bicycle network is a complete coherent network, right? You can get around the whole city still, and by safely and by bike. So our next stop, we're gonna have to go a little bit of a round, and we're gonna go into the Admiral Routerkade. It's another couple minutes. All right. So here we go. So here we are at a roundabout. We even used it, right? Everyone went around once almost. Can we try to get just a little closer so I don't have to yell so loud? So this stop is all about Dutch traffic principles, safety principles. And the Dutch engineers really love roundabouts because it is sort of this maximum efficiency, right? But it is this perspective that we want to have maximum efficiency from A to B, all right? So you will see no traffic lights, right? Except for the tram. The tram has priority. So if there's a tram there, it's signaled to be red for everybody else and green for the tram. But otherwise, it flows as one continuous intersection, basically, right? With a big blob of green in the middle. You will notice the red all around. The red signalizes the red carpet for cyclists. For those of you who are interested, it's 3 centimeters thick of a dyed asphalt. So it's actually very expensive, but it's a nice color. It's very noticeable, and this is one of the principles of designing bicycle infrastructure for Dutch standards and many other standards in the world, that it's visible, it's recognizable. Anytime you see a red pavement, you will know as a cyclist, oh, this is for me, right? I can be here. And on the other hand, if you're a car driver, you will know, oh, there's something, the pavement is changing, I need to pay attention. The other major sort of reason why there are no traffic lights, is that there are signals on the pavement. So this is maybe standard for places in Europe, but for people from outside of Europe, the little triangles on the ground, what do they look like in the American context? The yield signs, exactly. So here we call them shark teeth. If the shark teeth are pointing at you, you yield. And so then that means that we don't have to have tons of signs in the space, taking up valuable visible space. What else? Sustainable safety. Probably one of the most important concepts for Dutch traffic planning. And the 2 components of sustainable safety or systematic safety is, 1, humans make mistakes. We are fallible individuals. What was that?
Irrational.
We are irrational as well. We make mistakes. And 2, any traffic deaths or any traffic injuries resulting in the public space are unethical. Let that sink in for a moment, right? I think this is such a key principle that the Dutch government has decided that we are responsible for keeping our people safe. We are responsible for designing the infrastructure that they ride on a daily basis. So we are accountable for any injuries and fatalities, deaths that occur in this space. And so that is taken extremely seriously. This was implemented in the 90s. And as soon as this was implemented with such design techniques as the ones I've just explained, once this was implemented in the 90s, we saw a huge increase in cycling. And in Amsterdam, it overtook car use within a couple of years. Okay? So, and this kind of roundabout is a result of that type of policy implementation of sustainable safety. So the other way that this was implemented is in the classification of roads, which we've also experienced all together up until now on this tour. There are highways, right? No bicycles are allowed on the highways, but they have the roads next to it. Clear separation between cars and bikes on highways, right? Then we have arterioles, which are 50-kilometer roads. That would be probably something like this. I don't know exactly the speed limit here, but that also means separated infrastructure for bikes. Must be separated for maximum safety. Then there's a neighborhood collector, which may be actually this one that we just rode down here. It could be 30 kilometers an hour zone, but still separated, sometimes separated, sometimes not. It all depends on the context. And then finally residential, where there's no separation needed because car drivers are only driving less than 30 kilometers usually. But here there's a lot of contextual clues that tell car drivers to slow down even without lights, right? You'll probably notice every single car driver slows down right about here, okay? It's intuitive. You don't need a lot of signs. You don't need traffic light signals. You just need a context that supports what you want your road users to do. So key takeaway is that once the sustainable safety policies were implemented, then we saw a huge increase in cycling use and investing in that network, because that's the whole other thing, right, is money. How did they get all this money to change the roads? Well, like I said before, the best bicycle infrastructure is actually car infrastructure. So a lot of these changes were based on this idea that it's actually better for cars. And that's 100% true in this case. Car drivers are not delayed here because cyclists are separated. All right? So that's the other main lesson for this type of implementation. Do we have any questions about this? Yeah.
It seems like an important part is people paying attention to each other.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, in the U.S. we have a huge epidemic of mobile phone use while driving.
Yeah.
So how does that play into the culture here? I don't see a lot of people playing with their phones and driving.
I don't own a car, so I don't know what the laws are about cell phone use. I'm pretty sure it has to be docked. You can't be, using it in your hand. And then for cycling as well, this new policy, very controversial policy, was just implemented in was it July? So you have to be hands-free on your bike now, otherwise you might be fined. But there's a lot of debate about it in research, because some people think that that's sort of victim blaming, right? The cyclist needs to be alert so that they don't get killed. Well, we have these sustainable safety policies that should.
Where we come from, the motorists are playing with their phones.
Yes.
More than the bicyclists typically don't.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, just from my perspective, that might be a sign that that you are in a very car-dominated paradigm, right? I mean, the whole regime is auto-dominated in Santa Monica, and in that regime, then you get a different, result. I mean, there's every street, I think, I would argue, in Santa Monica is a car street. And then at certain points, other modes, cyclists, pedestrians are fit into that. The same goes for Munich people. It's a very car-dominated perspective of traffic design, and then the cyclists and other people are sort of fit in, squeezed in. And when you have this sort of top-down approach and dictating people's behavior based on top-down light infrastructure, signalization, that type of thing, then you can get this sort of laziness. And the laziness then manifests itself in doing other things, right? And the same goes for cycling. I mean, there's this flow theory. Flow theory says that the challenge of the user, so the challenge of cycling, needs to meet the spatial characteristics. So once you are not challenged in an environment, then you sort of lose focus, right? And you try to make that environment more challenging by doing other things like using your phone. So you will see, I mean, maybe another Dutch person could attend to this, that there's, my daughter is now cycling at the age of 5. And once you have reached that expert level of cycling in an environment like this, you are no longer really challenged. And you search for that challenge to reach that mental state of flow. And then you do things like use your phone. And the same, I think, for car driving. Is all about to say that it wasn't always this way. So where you are looking from to this way, this is the same street in 1981. So from the 30s, the city of Amsterdam and many other Dutch cities were making room for the car. They were bulldozing streets. They had visions of huge highways, that the car was the future, right? The planners at the time and engineers, they actually had Americans come and teach them how to build highways and what to do. And actually a lot of Dutch engineers at the time went to the States, went to Los Angeles to learn about this innovation of the time, this new massive modern way of designing cities. And so Amsterdam wasn't alone in this. Utrecht, Delft, every Dutch city had big plans to knock down beautiful historic core like this and build highways. We're not in that area, but in the southern part of the city where this demolition happened, many of the residents were not happy with this, right? And this was the 70s, so there were a lot of revolutions and upset riots about things. But here, there was also this sentiment that we don't want the car in our city center. We want livability. We want places for our children to play. And this image was all over the city. Cars parked everywhere because there were no schemes, there were no policies in place to manage this type of occurrence, right? So part of the sustainable safety, when that happened, they also implemented parking schemes in the city of Amsterdam. Actually, the vote, it was a whole policy that aimed for 50% reduced congestion. Sound familiar? In many cities around the world, this is sort of what's happening, right? But this was back in the late 80s. So 50% less congestion, and with that, a parking management scheme. That will, residents and visitors will pay for parking, and also very importantly, traffic calming zones. So this is an example of traffic calming. These very, slow streets where there's shops and restaurants. These are perfect streets for vehicles to be driving very slow, for people to be driving slow and watching out for their surroundings. And once this was implemented, the policy won by one vote in Amsterdam. So this really could have been Brussels, easily. This city could have been exactly like Brussels if you've been. It's a very, very car-oriented city. So by one vote, we were very lucky in that way. And with the parking management, that adds about 120 million euros a year to fund other maintenance and upgrades of cycle paths and bicycle infrastructure. So it created this great purse, this sustainable purse that keeps reoccurring over and over every year. So here, if you want to park your car as a visitor, it's probably something like 4 euros, 5 euros an hour, all hours of the day, or at least until midnight, if not longer. also on Sundays. So I think this goes to show that it's, space is usually never an issue, right? I think a lot of city streets in many cities around the world are this wide. But it's not an issue of space, it's rather an issue of politics, right? And priorities, and where investments go, how to invest. But this street has been redone, retrofitted several times in the last few years. This is the most recent version that happened, I think, in 2016. And beforehand, there were a lot more places for car parking. And a resident noticed on a snowy, wintry day that it was a Wednesday afternoon, and all the cars that were parked on this street still had inches of snow on top of their roof. And she thought, that's strange. It's a Wednesday, and these cars are parked here that it shows that they haven't moved, right? And so she did her own little parking study, and also gave the results to the borough municipality, and said, hey, nobody's using their car. They're using it on the weekend, maybe. And so she eventually got another group of citizens together and approached the municipality and said, we want this street redesigned. This is not working. I mean, if people aren't even using their car only for the weekend, it's simply unfair. And she herself didn't own a car. So what her vision is to use this space for children, for walking and enjoying this lovely street instead of trying to circulate, and find parking or just park a private vehicle. So this most recent iteration was this bottom-up initiative that I thought is so nice to share, because it's also not just this top-down. It's not just the city government saying we know what's best for you. It's actually also a bottom-up organic initiative that created the change. Other questions? Impressions so far?
Sensational.
Are you learning something? I hope.
May I take a picture of this?
Yeah, of course.
Just hold it and move it like.
It's not my photo, so it's the city archives. Just want to cite that source verbally. I was born 1 year later. Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
We were talking before about, responsibility and that sort of thing, and people being aware. Apparently, from my understanding, if a motorist hits a cyclist or pedestrian, it's always the burden of proof is on the motorist, and that's
a really good question. So from the policy implementation side, sustainable safety, from the legal framework side, a really big, I would say, a paradigm shift is the legal, what is it called? Presumed liability. Presumed liability means that in 99% of the cases of crashes, the vehicle with the highest capacity for speed and mass are at fault. So in that sense, even if a cyclist runs a red light and is in a crash with a vehicle, that driver, the vehicle, will most likely be at fault. So that is a huge shift, right? That's something that is very hard to sort of transfer from one city to another, because that involves a lot of politics and a lot of legal implications for how a whole legal system is set up, right? I mean, everybody has sort of insurance here. So if I borrowed someone's phone and accidentally dropped it, then it would, we would be able to take care of it pretty easily with our sort of general liability. But in the case of cycling and car driving, yeah, that changes a lot. The presumed liability laws changes a lot of things. So that means, everybody is a bit more careful, right? Yeah. Good question.
That might also go to the whole like cell phone thing and everything else. And, like,
yeah.
Even one, you have to be more aware, because a lot of the, there's a lot more moving.
Yeah.
Around.
Yeah. We still see aggressive driving, though. You know, it's not a utopia for sure. There's still aggressive driving, and that I think also takes sort of a root in maybe social differences as well. You know, here a lot of the taxi drivers, at least I notice, can be very aggressive and driving very fast and very close to a cyclist. Another big policy issue that's been occurring for the last decade really are the mopeds and scooters that have mostly in the recent past been on the bicycle path, and was just recently in April moved to the roadway with the rest of cars. So that had pretty huge implications. I definitely noticed a difference. It's much nicer now to ride on the bike path without that. But it's rooted in this speed differential. Actually, something like 40% of all crashes in Amsterdam were scooters. And having that vehicle on a bike path where people are riding a bicycle much slower, the speed differential was making it unsafe for all road users. So I think the main argument for the city of that change was saying we want to protect everyone, including scooter drivers. I mean, they were putting themselves at risk by riding in the bike path, as well as other people, especially vulnerable users. You know, children and elderly who are riding bicycles who cannot react, you know, in time. It was affecting them as well. We came from, you know, this idea of experimentation and also this new challenge for the city that cycling is growing in certain parts of Amsterdam. And so designers and planners are having to go outside of standards and guidebooks and guidelines to accommodate this growing challenge and growing need. So we are at one of the sort of newest ideas and experiments around this, that not only intersections like the one that I asked you to pay attention to, right? There's no traffic lights. There was that new, did everyone see that big, huge, God, it must have been 4 meters wide of red asphalt. And so it's not only these intersections and large, you know, infrastructure projects, it's also happening on a smaller scale residential level. So this street used to have sort of parallel parking all together. It's so new. I haven't had a chance to print out what it used to look like. And you see, and it's in the place of where the car parking was, is new bike parking, and also these sort of green, you can see on this side maybe better, these sort of green areas for plants and greenery, and in some cases maybe picnic benches and things. So the idea here is that, you know, we don't just need streets as places for storage of vehicles, but also places to meet and to grow, you know, green landscaping, and it's this fine attention to detail. You see on the street we have this red pavement, bricks again, where it used to be asphalt, kind of just boring black asphalt, and in its place there's this sort of human scale quality that makes it more, I don't like the word livable, because, you know, what would a relation, like a husband and wife, if you said my life at home is livable, that's also kind of weird. So livable, I don't know, but maybe just human scaled, very very fine attention to the details, and I mean, this wasn't easy also. I mean, they had to convince local residents, maybe we have a local resident here, of, sorry? Do you need to get by? No? She's looking. You're just curious, yeah. I'm also very curious about this process here, but from what I've understood, that it's happening in sort of many different neighborhoods, that the city is engaging with local residents, asking them, what do you want in your neighborhood? What do you see for the future? And many are saying, well, we want more green space, we want more bicycle parking, we want more trees and places for our children to play. And so then the city will say, okay, well, then we need to take away your car parking. And in some cases, in some neighborhoods, the city is also investing heavily in these underground car parking facilities that can be actually quite expensive. One in the southern part of the city, they just put underneath a canal. But the Dutch are very good at water engineering, so that makes it easier. But at 80,000 euros per car parking space, it makes you wonder, what else could they be doing with this money instead of spending it on state-of-the-art car parking facilities? However, it is creating space above ground for things like bike parking and planters and picnic benches and things like that. So there's always a push and pull, right? Again, we just went through this. Little alleyway. I don't know if you noticed the school. So we went sort of underneath the school, or through the school rather. The school was on top and to the side, and it used to be just a normal street back in the 70s. So again, also this idea of traffic calming areas that should be traffic calmed. That there's children around. So yes, people driving cars need to be driving very slow, if not near them at all, right? They can put cars on a different street. In the 60s and 70s, this is what it looked like. It was a highway through to the city center. And if you imagine, back in the 1600s when this was built, we were at the outskirts. Around us was fields, right? So as the city grew and grew around it, this also became a really important monument for the city. And it was also a monument for vehicles. Cars could drive through this. But during the renovation in the early 2000s, this was up for grabs and became a huge political debate because, well, the head curator of the museum wanted this passageway to be his private staff entrance. So they wanted to shut it down to the public and leave it for just his staff and private taxis and things. So that was a big debate, and the national advocacy group, the Fietsersbond, heavily got involved on a local level and a national level. And finally, after years of debate, they finally came to an agreement that it would be a bike path opened up for the public. And I think the result is something that could not be put into any engineering model, because so many people actually go out of their way to use this bike path on a regular day, on a regular commute. And that experience of going through this tunnel, sort of, you get almost chills because you're underneath the Dutch masters. It's part of this very artistic, emotional experience. And then with the renovations, it became even more grand, because you can see into the museum once we go through. And actually, under the first gate, above the first gate, is the Night Watch, probably one of the most famous paintings in all of Dutch history. And there's even an escape for the painting. So if you look up really quick, you'll be able to see this escape. And I can just imagine that, in a fire, of course, the painting would fall down on an urban arrow and we would ride away to safety. But it hasn't, this is all to say it hasn't been easy. It's not like all of a sudden the whole nation decided we're going to be a cycling nation and poof, it's done. It's been inch by inch, curb by curb. It's been something that is continually developed, continually experimented with, and also continually debated. But in the end, the politicians, right wing or left wing, it's now such a part of society that it's not necessarily political anymore. The former alderman of traffic has said, cycling is not something that is right or left. It's just something that needs to be done. So I think it's gotten to a point where it's almost transcended politics in a way, because there is such a momentum. There's so many people cycling. But this is also to say it hasn't always been this way, right? There was a shift. And it's not necessarily a shift in culture or a shift in mindset. It's a shift in political priorities and investments. And that's, I think, the trickiest part about transferring this to other places that are also struggling with congestion and public health and all these things that are related to transportation, is that it needs to be a political shift. Last stop, there's so many aspects of sort of Dutch cycling that we could go on for hours and hours, but one of the most crucial points is also the link with public transit. And I usually do this stop at a train station, but the next best thing is the newest metro line, and sort of what I would call this as a transit hub. Because we have several tram lines, at least 3 tram lines going here. And right across the street from me, it's sort of discreet, is the newest multi-million euro north-south metro line running this access of the city center. And behind you can see all the bike parking. And to the left, to the right, all around this traffic circle is bicycle parking. Because at most train stations, all the policymakers suddenly realized about 8 years ago that they had this problem. And it was the bicycle parking problem. All of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but over the years, they've noticed that people are riding bicycles are parking their bike in front of the station. And they've been piling up and piling up and piling up. So if you go to Amsterdam Central Station, you'll see this huge 4-story barge on a river, on the water, of bicycle parking, right? Has anybody seen that? Have you seen that? Yeah. So that was actually a temporary installment in I think the 2000 maybe. It was supposed to be there for 6 months. It's still there. Okay, and now the city has realized that, well, hey, we have a lot of people riding bikes to the station. Let's actually accommodate for that, right? Let's put in facilities, safe, high quality facilities for people to park their bicycle, because this actually isn't necessarily a problem. It's the result of a super successful system called the bike train system, or the transit bike system, where in the Netherlands, 50% of all train passengers are arriving at the station by bike. So this is a huge difference in, for example, with transit-oriented development, if you've heard of this term. Transit-oriented development is all about walking distances. So about a 10-minute walk and you're at a transit stop, all right? Or a major train stop. But if you add the bicycle to that, you get a much larger catchment area, right? So if you looked at, in the Netherlands, what percentage of the Dutch population is within a 10-minute walking distance of a train? You get 10% of the population, 10%. If you add the bike to 7.5 kilometers, which is kind of long, it's kind of a long bike ride, for my standard at least, but it's possible still by a bike, then you get 85% of the population. And you not only have one train station, but you have 2.3. So also your choice enhances. So depending on your destination, you now have choices, you have more flexibility, and the train operator, the NS, has also realized this as well. So about 12 years ago, they started a bike sharing scheme that's based on station, per station, right? So if you go from Amsterdam Central Station, you want to go to Delft, at every station in the Netherlands, there will be a fleet of bicycles waiting for you at your destination station. And this system has become so popular that they have to add more and more bicycles to these fleets at stations. So for €3.90, you can have a public bike for all day in whatever that destination city. You have increased your flexibility even more because you have this bike instead of relying on public transit, especially in the city that you may not know very well. So in the end, you have these sort of transit hubs, right, where the bicycle can really, speaking of optimizing a system and capacity, that's what the bicycle does for the transit system. All these bicycles could not fit on top, inside, or attached to somehow the metro or the tram or even the train. You easily reach scale and capacity issues if you bring these bicycles onto trains, which is something really common in other cities. You bring your bike, you put your bike on the train or on the bus somehow. But if you provide parking facilities and then last mile options, then all of a sudden you have this super enhanced system. And that's what our researchers call the bike train system. So this is where we end. And I would love to, if anyone has any questions, comments.
Can you just talk a little about where you're working now and maybe some different, if people want to know more about these,
sure,
your studies and stuff.
Oh yeah.
About this stuff.
I could also do that back there.
Do that there,
Yeah.
I'm also just interested.
Very quickly, I can say that the Netherlands has become this hub for knowledge and experience, right? This is one of the only, if not the only country in the world where you can go to virtually any city in the Netherlands and see and experience a very high rate of cycling, even in the worst cycling city in the Netherlands, right? The worst cycling city in the Netherlands is Almere, just near Amsterdam, and they only have 16% of all trips are by bike, but even 16% any other city in the world would sort of love to have, or at least love to reach. So the Netherlands has become this sort of hub for knowledge, and at the Urban Cycling Institute we participate actively in European projects. So actually Munich is one of the cities we're working with, in addition to Copenhagen, and I think 23 other cities are in our European projects. And it's all around transferring this type of knowledge and practice and policies to other countries. And how do you do that? Because of course you deal with geographical, legal, financial, network, organizational, all these types of differences. And so it's become a very interesting topic of transferring this type of knowledge. And when we get back, I'm happy to talk to anybody about this or other resources, or because we have tons of resources and other ways to get involved. I think you guys as the business behind it is a really interesting intersection, right? Because obviously for many of you, your core goal is to sell bikes. So how do we sell bikes without having an environment that encourages safe cycling. And I would love to hear from you guys about how you're working with your communities to not only advocate, but to also sort of show that you do it yourselves. I mean, I hope you guys are also cycling in the cities that you're in. But how, where do you fit? Where does the industry fit in this conversation? I think a lot of you have that power to, and that community. I mean, I'm sure you also have people who are using your shops a lot as a community hub for these challenges. So there's a lot of ways I think that the industry has a role to play in making change and advocating for change. And messaging, right? Communicating, how we communicate about cycling is also very, very important. The bikes that we are riding here are very, very different types of bikes than a lot of other countries think about cycling, right? Which is like the mammal, the race bike with a helmet and very aggressive looking. Whereas these bikes are a lot about fun, about putting your family in there, putting your groceries in, delivering goods and to people. So there's a lot of really cool interactions that I think the industry has to play in that. So that could be a continuing conversation. Yeah, cool.